Righto.
Here we are.
Here we are. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's
December, I think.
Yeah, December. Trying to summarise a year.
Yeah. Damn, feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
Shit.
We're at a different part
We're
of the
already in
park.
March. Oh shit. Yep.
We were like over there talking
Yeah.
shit.
Back again.
You've been out and about. You haven't just like been roaming around the park.
Well, not everything's on Strava, so don't know that.
You've been travelling since
Yeah.
we last caught up.
Yeah.
You've tell us what's been going on.
Man. So I guess I went away. So I left Melbourne maybe mid-December, and I spent most of my time over in Perth with family over like Christmas and New Year's, and I got to spend 2 weeks in Mumbai, in India for a friend's wedding. And initially, I guess that was most of January, and then I came back in February. But yeah, I guess over the past month, I've been kind of like debriefing my brain on like what that trip has like revealed to me in many
Was
ways.
that just the Mumbai part or like Perth as well? Mainly Mumbai.
Mainly Mumbai, yeah.
Yeah.
Perth has been it's a very like stable place for me, so there was nothing too much more that I needed to see there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mumbai, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Indian wedding.
Indian
First
wedding.
Indian wedding.
Yeah. First ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it all it was cracked up to? Did it live up to the hype? What was the, how'd you feel walking into it?
Yeah.
Like,
maybe I can start with like how it came about in the first place.
yeah.
Which is, I've got this good friend who was the groom. Groom? Yes, I've got the terminology correct. Thank God, don't kill me. So I met the groom like around like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we got to know each other really when we went on exchange to China for like 3 months.
Yeah.
So we were living overseas together, and it was like one of the best like 3 months of my life, I would say.
Yeah, wow.
And then fast forward to last year, I would roughly around June, he was like, no, sorry. Maybe I'll backtrack even before that. Around February, I was back in Perth and we were hanging out. I was like, hey, how's it going? And we're just chatting, and nothing really new happened. You know, he was still single. And then in June, he suddenly comes up, on a DM, and he's like, so I think I'm getting married in June. In Mumbai. Do you want to come along? And then I was like, hang on a minute. The last time I saw you, you were single. Don't know who this person is, but sure, why not? Mumbai, sure, yeah, I'll come along.
How did that, there's a couple of things there.
Yeah.
How did that happen so quickly? Was it like, the thing that just comes to my mind is like arranged marriage because of like, it's an Indian tradition.
Yeah.
Is it like that, or are you just like found the love of his life somewhere?
I don't know exactly the backstory and haven't really asked him, but one day I'll find out.
So you don't even know. You're just like, I hear there's a wedding.
Yeah.
Indian weddings are like a big party.
Yes.
Why not we just say yes?
Yes. Oh man.
And so we'll come back to India.
Yeah.
You said that, geez, I love it when people tell me stuff that like I've never heard before.
Oh, okay.
Because you were like, I spent 3 months in China on exchange and like the best 3 months of my life. Like, if it's the best 3 months, probably not a forgettable point or like something you'd probably bring up in conversation at some point. What?
So it hasn't. It hasn't come up.
Yeah.
I guess,
What makes the 3 months?
Yeah.
Was this exchange from uni or from school?
Uni.
Okay, so from uni.
Yeah.
What made it the 3 months?
Yeah.
Like the best 3 months, and like whereabouts in China was it?
So we're based in Hangzhou, which is a southern city quite close to Shanghai. It's a little bit west of Shanghai, and there were a few things going on. The first thing was that in order to graduate, all the engineering undergrads had to get some work experience. So I didn't get any of the prestigious positions that came up in WA because the economy wasn't that good, like around 2014, 2015. So when the thought of China came about, I was like, oh yeah, I'll just do it. Like it's gonna give me the hours. You know. So it's one of those things like.
So it popped up through uni.
Yeah.
There's like, hey, we've got a sister program over in a different uni. Yeah,
yes. And it was like I guess a research position where that would be the primary like goal of like helping the research institute like develop their stuff, research.
Yeah.
And so initially it was kind of like I didn't quite get like the positions I kind of like looked up to.
Yeah.
Let's go to China just to like tick the box.
Yeah.
But after the fact, it's like, man, thank God.
Yeah.
I had that pathway open. Yeah.
Okay, so you get over there.
Yeah.
What was it about China?
Yeah.
Like, yes, so it's like an experience that you're like, everyone has it, like, this is a shit experience. Why the fuck am I doing this? There's better things that I feel like could have helped me on my path to grow.
Yeah.
But you're like, yeah, this ticks a box. It definitely helps me progress, but it's not the path that I want to take.
Yeah.
And so you do it, but then on the other side, you're like, this is probably like one of the most influential experiences of your life. What changed? Was it like a mindset thing? Was it a experience thing of like seeing a different part of the world? Was it just the dumplings? Like, what was it?
I think probably around that time, I was kind of being more open to traveling, and like maybe a year before that, I would have started exploring places like traveling to Europe, backpacking with my brother, and things like that. So that China trip kind of came at some point after that. So China for me felt like very foreign, and in my head I had all these like presumptions about what China would have been like, and when I got there, it was kind of like not knowing what could happen, and it was more like an adventure.
Yeah.
Of like, shit, I don't know how to speak Chinese.
Yeah.
How am I even gonna survive?
Yeah. So like there was a lot of like unknowns because it's definitely not an easy language to understand or like understand the writing. What did you do over there? Was there like a lot of time in research labs or?
Yeah. That was the bulk of the time in the sense that like, Monday to Friday we'll spend time with a supervisor and like maybe like 2-3 other colleagues, and we'll do like theoretical research or like work in the lab. It's going to sound really lame, but they were a coal power research institute. So there was a building of hundreds of people trying to optimize coal power generation.
Yeah.
Which sounds, I guess, from my current viewpoint, it sounds really lame. But when you have a country that big, it's really important that you maximize the productivity of the resources you use. Yeah. So I learned all about like, coal melts at a certain temperature and this is what happens, and all the theoretical nerdy stuff that probably it's not too important. And then on the weekends, we would like get to travel to places like Beijing or Shanghai or like Xi'an, and then just being exposed to like a foreign culture.
Yeah.
Eating a lot of like cheap but like amazingly delicious food.
Yeah.
And then living in a place that was really cold.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was like a highlight. That it was so cold, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I for the most part I lived in Perth. Yeah. And cold only got to like, I don't know, like 12 degrees.
Yeah. So I guess it was, correct me if I'm wrong, from like what you're telling me, it's what made it such a valuable experience was one, seeing a different country and being exposed to the different foods and the different places, and probably when you're working with locals and understanding locals, they can probably take you to places and see things that like if you went to these like cities you wouldn't actually know existed.
Yes.
But like the second part is like the research that you did over there was very stimulating.
Yes.
In the sense of it doesn't feel interesting, but it's like when you're trying to optimize the process. And of course, we have to have running in the podcast at some point. It's like when you're trying to like run faster, of like how do you do that? Do you run more? Do you do more tempo sessions? Do you do things? But when it's like coal, it's like what's the optimum heat temperature? How much coal do you put in this thing? Like, is the machine actually like is the furnace at the right size and capacity for like loading? I don't know the differences of like what it went into, but it's like this balance of a very exposed new foreign variety, which are in a different country, but also like quite mentally stimulating for you to go, oh, like, oh my God, like I feel like I'm making a difference. That like this 0.1 or like 0.5% efficiency in burning of coal is actually huge on a scale of like 1 billion people.
Yes,
basically.
That's correct. I think it was kind of like connecting the dots in the sense that like, oh, why am I studying all this like theoretical stuff for? And then that was kind of like, maybe with any sort of like work experience, it kind of connects the learning you do in that isolated environment to like the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like a 2-degree temperature, whatever. Here it might look small, but actually it has a huge impact downstream that you might not see.
Yeah.
And then maybe one thing I didn't really cover is that I went there with the groom and also another friend, and I think that
and you guys were like uni friends. Before and like you were
like classmates. But like we were, I mean, sharing time together, I guess, like hanging out.
Like you knew each other, but like weren't close.
Yeah. And then it was that kind of became like the formative experience that now, like 10 years later, we still hang out. Like, So speaking of getting to know the locals and having like weird experiences, towards the end of our trip, like in Chinese culture, there's like a lot of like customs around like treating the guests well. So the whole institute knew that we were the 3 foreigner kids who were there for exchange. Towards the end of our time, their idea of a celebration was to get us to sing karaoke in front of the whole company. So our supervisor, who was like, it was almost like mandated from the top in the sense that my supervisor had the job of like making sure we were ready for this karaoke thing towards the end, because if we stuffed up, it would reflect badly on our supervisor. So like maybe like 4 weeks out or 3 weeks out or something, after work she would take us to like karaoke like studios where we'll like sing, and then the song of choice that came up was Yellow by Coldplay. So
you only had to remember one song.
One song.
It wasn't like a full concert for like the whole thing. You only had to remember one song.
But that's a long like 3 minutes or whatever.
And so like when you were performing it, did you have like the words in front of you?
No.
You had to like, fuck.
Man, and I don't sing like at all, but like I had a duty to perform, so. Oh God.
And so the rendition is. No, I'm kidding. I was gonna.
I'm out.
Wow, that's like, I feel like karaoke is like a very big Asian thing. And like, there's a lot of like Australians and like other parts of the world where it's like a big thing, but I'm like, I couldn't think of anything worse in my life to be like, you know, a fun night is like singing songs. But clearly it's like an important part of their culture, which is fascinating. And so like,
apparently yes.
You're the groom. You guys got pretty close over there because it's like foreign people in like foreign country. Like closest thing you had to like someone that you know or some like certainty.
I think it makes me think about like one of the great things about traveling for me is like the people you get to travel with. You kind of like learn, like through traveling, like you kind of learn like different sides to the people who you thought you knew, including yourself. Like you know, you kind of learn things about yourself, and then you kind of learn new things about old people who you think you know. So I think like that those 3 months we kind of like, you know, we had to live together, we had to learn how to cook foreign food together, figure out like what is drinkable water or not, get judged a lot, and sing karaoke in front of a whole company together.
That is like an intense bonding experience.
It is.
It feels like some sort of what is it, like in the US college system of like hazing. Like a very hazing experience. But like as a result of that you become very close. No, very interesting. When you've got, did that spark the idea for travel, or was it just like an intense, memorable experience that you feel like shifted who you were a lot?
I'm not sure if that, I mean, it's like there was the Europe trip or like the backpacking trip through Europe. There was that trip to China, and I think I wouldn't describe it as a spark, but it's more like because a spark is something that like flames on and then it disappears after a while, or maybe that's not quite accurate. I think it's kind of like it just feels more like a cumulative experience of like, oh, spending 3 months in China was worthwhile. So whatever I do next, how can I seek the same, I guess.
How do you create a similar experience
Yeah.
in the future?
Yeah.
So like, because it's such a good experience, how do you create that in a different city, in a different place?
Yeah. Like whether it's through like traveling or anything else, I think.
Yeah.
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 I reckon we want to speak a little bit louder.
Okay.
We'll go again. We'll keep going. Like, I think we've noticed, it's like, okay, my voice seems to be quite loud and Julian needs to be like screaming basically. But we'll see how we go. I feel like travel this is like the uncut version, guys. This is on our Patreon.
Man.
But it's like travel is like quite interesting in the sense of a lot of people tell you that you should do it when you're younger. And like, you don't know what traveling's like until you've done it.
Yeah.
It's like an experience that you've got to go through to understand the value of it. And you never actually know what you sign up for. It's like a doorway that's like, I swear it's good, but it could be shit. It could be good.
Yes.
And on the other side, who you become as a result of that changes, because it changes your whole environment. And so
that's correct.
Shifts your perspective almost.
Yeah.
Because I think the way I've seen it now was like growing up, I was probably lucky enough that my family took me to different places for like conferences and stuff like that. I wouldn't say like extreme ends of like cultural like displacement in the sense of like there's a lot of like Fiji, Vanuatu, New Zealand, went to America once. And so it is different, and it is, some areas are like socially different economically, but like they're quite westernized to an extent that like the hotels are still like somewhat nice, and there isn't the pure exposure. Like you almost realize that like there's other parts of the world that exist outside of like where you are.
Yeah. I think that's a big insight in that one. Yeah.
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 And that like that's almost normal. To a point. And so I think travel has probably been something that I've wanted to do for a while, but like haven't made a priority of recent, because it's been like a more of a theoretical growth tool. Like I've been working on like theoretical growth tools of like books and like courses and like understanding stuff, as opposed to traveling and just trusting the process of traveling. Almost.
Because it's in many ways it's like it's not the safe bet, right?
No.
You're kind of like betting on the unknown. And so a book might be a reasonably safe bet. You might spend $20 and like you can drop it or keep reading it. So that's safe compared to like spending, I don't know, $1,000 to buy a ticket to some place that you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like not knowing what experience you're going to get out of it.
Yes.
And it's like this balance of like, okay, you can go over there to create an experience, but when you try to fabricate a travel experience, it doesn't really work. It's like the bullshit. Like the biggest example might be, so in New Zealand, there's like setup of like old villages of like, this is what it was like back in the day. And like, you go in there and you understand it, but like it's not a pure like experience of culture. Like it's a historical reference point, but it's not true. Same in like any museum that you go to.
Yeah.
And so it's like a fabricated experience that's intended to help you to understand.
Right.
But in reality, like some of the most influential experiences are like the stuff that like you can't actually fabricate and plan, and that happen without expectation.
Right. Yeah. I wish we could have it all, in the sense that like to have the certainty and also the upside that comes from spontaneity.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to, it goes like this way. Like you can't have both.
Yeah.
It's like in order to, if you open the door and you're fully opening yourself up to spontaneity, then you kind of have to accept that you're letting go of security by choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You let go of security and certainty of growth, but at the same time, it's sort of like this balance of you want to have like more faith.
Yes, that's a big one.
A lot more. And like
lot.
trusting that something's going to come from it, basically.
Yes. Yeah, come from it, or maybe even the faith kind of starts with you, like in the sense that you kind of have to trust that you can handle whatever situation, good or bad, that might come from it.
Yeah, because it's like part of me is almost like thinking that like booked flights to Europe, haven't booked anything else.
Right.
In and out of London, and I want to go to London to go see the Premier League and like see the soccer, but it's the culture there is like very, very similar to like here. And so it's like, what is the intention of going there to create something of like, is there a bigger referential perception shift going there versus like going to Vietnam? That's like a bigger cultural shift. I wanted to go to other parts of Europe, like plan is to just stay around Ireland, UK, Britain to like experience different languages and different cultures. But to go, okay, how can you like make the most of that experience? And so you've recently come back from Mumbai. We're coming full circle. We love a good tangent here if you haven't realised. How did you approach, was it just Mumbai or did you go to another city in India?
So that was kind of like a spontaneous decision, but I started in Mumbai, and then on the way back I stopped at one of the most eastern cities in India, which is called Calcutta.
Yeah.
Kolkata these days, but yeah, so 2 cities in 2 weeks.
And so then how did you approach the travel of what you decide to do each day there? Like I said, I saw so many different stories of like, here's this plate of food, and then here's this old looking building, and then like, here's these people on motorbikes. And it was like a very, I love the word eclectic at the moment, but it's like a very differential experience. And just my perception of what you were doing was just walking around, taking photos and absorbing it in. Is that what you're doing, or was there some intentionality of where you'd go and like find certain looks, or just walking around the city?
Yeah, I mean, my preferred way of traveling, well, let me put it this way maybe. I kind of went into, when I got onto that plane, no, even before that, like when I started packing for the trip, I kind of wanted to be a backpacker. So that was the baseline I was starting with. Like, how does a backpacker dress? What luggage was I going to carry? And then what sort of places would I live at, right? So when I got on the plane, I was like, okay, like, what does a backpacker do? A backpacker mostly walks around, but like, you know, catches public transport, maybe a taxi every now and there. But the whole intention was like, okay, I'm going there to see as much as I can see. Not so much, it wasn't about like minimizing costs, but it was more about maximizing experience. So in my head, to maximize experience was to walk the streets. So that's mostly how I got around. And with coming up with what to do every single day, it was kind of on the fly. Like because like like on the first day it was kind of like, okay, like the only certain thing in that very first day was like, okay, knowing that I had a place to live at. And then everything else was negotiable.
Just had like a hostel basically. And obviously had a wedding to be at some point in time. You're like, I got to make it back there. It's kind of the whole point of the trip. But when you, I'm guessing it's just like wandering and walking. Do you think about stuff, or do you just take it all in, or like how do you approach travel? Is there an approach, or is it just like for the lulz?
It's kind of like for the lulz. In that, like, I've got this like hobby that I regularly do, which is like well, not regularly these days, but I get a lot of like joy from like walking around cities or places with a camera.
Yeah.
So I would like, you would find me like 5 hours later, just like maybe have taken like no photographs, but still like have a good time.
Yeah.
So when I travel, I pretty much do more of the same, but in a different environment. So when I'm walking around, let's say in a new city, I kind of like, just follow the wind almost.
Yeah.
Which sounds very lame because like, it doesn't do justice to like it's hard to describe that openness, but you kind of, that's my preferred way to travel.
Yeah. Because it's, when I was in Vietnam, I was listening to a book. I think it's like Vagabonding or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that was like my approach to intellectualize the idea of freedom and travel, which is like a classic overthinking personality. I need to have a book to try and understand of like how to approach it. And I got it from like Tim Ferriss. And it was something of, when you start a podcast, what are the tips you should do? It's like vagabonding, like reading this book was like one of those tips. I'm like, podcast isn't travel, but it's this process of accepting the fact that everyone's travel wants and needs are different.
Yes, that's a big one.
And not saying that like the only way to travel is to walk around a city, or the only way to travel is to go buy like luxury limousine.
Yep.
And like stay in a hotel. That everyone's different, but like it's always like openness to experience of like creating the opportunity for stuff to happen.
Yes.
And realizing that it's not something isn't going to happen all the time that's memorable or intense or experiencing, but like you're almost like opening up experience for the authentic humanness to exist.
Yes.
Is probably what it's like working for.
Yes.
And so your theory of walking around taking photos, what's the intention of that? What are you hoping to try and find when you walk around a city?
I think for me, like, it's kind of like what I'm trying to do essentially is almost like I'm trying to get rid of as much of my own internal like presumptions as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like I kind of want to go into that environment with a blank slate.
Yeah.
So I think walking around with a camera, in this case, I was too afraid to carry a camera because I was a bit wary, so I had my phone. So I was using the same mentality anyway. So just working with a blank slate and not having judgment in order to see what life actually looks like and feels like and smells like was the intention. And the camera just helped me do that. And so I'll tell you a bit of a story, which is, I think on that first day, because before landing in Mumbai, I heard all these stories about like how the food is unsafe and I was gonna get sick, and there's this whole thing about like Delhi belly, and I was like, oh man, I'm so afraid. It's like, what am I gonna do? So the drinking water part of it is like one thing, so I got that sorted. You know, you kind of rely on bottled water, but the food thing, I was like, oh man, I don't know if I trust these places, so I kind of like fell back into my usual habits, which is like check Google Maps, check for reviews. And so I was wandering around trying to find like a particular place, but as I was trying to get there, I noticed that like maybe 2 minutes from where I was staying, there was a huge line of people at like 5 p.m. Lining up for a restaurant. And I was like, yeah, I'll just follow them. Why not?
Yeah.
Because if there's a queue, it should be fine.
Yeah.
And that restaurant turned out to be like probably the best meal I had.
Okay.
Which was like a southern style dosa.
Yeah.
And what was really cool was that I kind of, I was real nervous at the time, like ordering food. You kind of have to like talk to people.
You have to talk to people to order food.
Yeah, like, whoa, wild, right?
The miming stuff wasn't working for you?
No, didn't work. But a lot of people spoke, like English was very common there, so language barrier wasn't a problem. But it was just like my own like assumptions of like, oh, I'm a foreigner in this foreign land, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
So once I placed the order, I got my food, whatever, I started eating. But I was standing next to another local who was eating, and somehow I had the courage to like ask him like how to say this? What I ordered was the dosa, but I also had a drink.
Yeah.
And that drink was like I think it was a coffee. Yeah, anyways, it was a coffee, but imagine like a cup that's placed in a bowl.
Okay.
Okay, right?
It's an empty bowl.
Empty bowl. And I was like, what the hell am I doing with this bowl? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I was looking for help. So I turned to the person next to me. I was like, how am I meant to like drink this? Then he's like, oh, so sometimes the coffee might not be mixed properly.
Yeah.
So you gotta tip the cup, the contents of the cup into the bowl and then drink from the bowl. I'm like, okay.
How does that change? Don't know.
But it's the local tradition.
Okay.
So I was like, as I was tipping it, I spilt it. Like I spilt a lot of it. But anyways, I did it and then drank from the thing. And then, yeah, just started, a conversation with the person who I'd asked.
Yeah.
And yeah, it turned out to be like super fun. Sometimes, I mean, even the thought of like going to a restaurant alone can be quite scary. Like especially, here in Australia or maybe even like in anywhere really.
Yeah.
It's kind of like frowned down upon, except maybe like Japan. So made a friend, had delicious food, didn't get sick, continued walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like this odd experience of asking somebody. Like
Yeah.
It's really weird in this modern term of.
Yeah.
I find myself continually when I feel uncomfortable bringing out my phone. Like whenever I feel alone,
yes.
I'm like, look at it. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm busy. I'm doing like emails or like TikTok is really important. I don't have TikTok, but like my reels on Instagram. I'm like, where's the next meme I can send to Julian? I'm like, it's like okay, this is like me being existent. But there was a point in
Right.
time when people would just stand around waiting for stuff,
Yeah.
and it felt normal to just pick up a conversation with a stranger.
Yes.
Whereas like now it is like almost like the oddest thing, or like I still feel like it's odd to just randomly start a conversation with somebody without the intention to get anything or give anything, or like to just go, you're a stranger also in line.
Yeah.
Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Are you here for a coffee? Are you here for food? Is it like the best food in the world? Are you just like working your 9 to 5? Like having the curiosity to just ask somebody in a day-to-day without the intention. Because it's sort of like the 100 runs that I'm going through is like there's this commonality of running and trying to understand why someone runs or like about someone. Whereas starting a conversation in a cafe, there's no context. Someone's just going about their day.
I mean, I think maybe that's like one of the superpowers of like being a traveler, in that you can afford to look stupid, whether it's to yourself or to other people. So when you ask something stupid, like, how do you drink this coffee?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, this stupid foreigner doesn't know what he's doing. Let me help him.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe there's that is, it's a superpower in that you're, I was more willing to look stupid in front of other people, and other people were more accepting of me looking stupid to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's that.
It's like almost like there's like the idea of like all the different paradoxes. It's like there is this comfortability paradox that when you're not local, you're not expected to know how things are.
Yes.
But it's not like a guarantee that like, yeah, you just go to the cafe and line up and order your coffee and takeaways in a paper cup and like eat-ins in like a normal like mug or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're a traveller and you go and order a coffee, like you don't actually really know what the custom of that thing is.
Yeah.
Almost. And there's, like you said, this paradox that everyone's very comfortable with you looking silly.
Yes.
Like one of the most fascinating things that I still see in the world is that when you're traveling and you go to a different country and you go to somewhere by yourself, everyone's like, oh, you're by yourself. Come and join us. Like, have a good night.
Oh, right.
It's like, they're very inclusive, like most people are very inclusive of like a foreign person in foreign land being like, how can I help you out?
Yeah.
Like, let's just like be a nice person. Whereas if you're in your hometown and go, oh, where are you from? Oh, Melbourne. Oh, we're in Melbourne. You're like, how do you not have friends? And so there's like this presumption of like, is there something wrong with this person because they don't know anybody and have some consistency?
Right.
Or like, that's just a perspective that I see. In that, when I first went over to Europe, it was really easy to go and like just talk to somebody who's like random.
Yeah.
Or like start a conversation on hostel, or like, because like you're in a foreign place, like you're not expected to have friends. It's not like a mandatory thing. But if you're in the city that you're meant to be living in, what does it say about you to be lonely almost? And like to not have any friends and to not be like, yo, what's coming up? Want to hang out Saturday, do a podcast? Like, you know what I mean? It's like an odd experience.
Yeah, this reminds me of like a theme we've touched on like previously, which is the whole like first person versus third person point of view. And I wonder what people think of me when I go around the city with my camera alone. I wonder what they think. Because I've never thought of that question, which is fascinating. Maybe they think I'm a tourist, which is great because they'll feel less threatened.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate like dream as a photographer.
That's the dream as a photographer.
Yeah.
To look like a tourist.
Yeah. Like, so let's say maybe I narrow it down a little bit. Like when I'm taking photographs, and I tend to like the street photography. So yeah, walking around blindly on the streets and taking photos is that label. The less threatening I look, the more people don't care that I'm there, the more authentic the photographs will look like.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to capture what the streets look like.
Yeah.
Or feel like. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's like this balance of, at what point do you stop becoming a tourist and you become a local? Like, is it when you decide to live there? 'Cause, like, we covered like you're from Perth, but you've also spent time up in Queensland, and so you're not like a local to Melbourne, but you've been here enough years to basically be a local that you should see a place as like your home.
Yeah.
And like the way you speak, you could quite easily be a local. Like, it's not as distinctive. There's like subtle differences between say Perth and Adelaide and like Melbourne and Sydney of like the accent's slightly different, but
we don't talk about Queensland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who cares about Queensland or Tasmania? Is Tasmania even?
We're gonna get cancelled.
Yeah. Tasmanians just come over and like storm the podcast. But it's like in the UK, the accent changes really significantly in a very close thing of like Birmingham is an hour away. It's massive. Even like different parts of London have like different accents.
Wow.
And so like to be out of place from like a Geordie down to like London, like they know that you're a foreigner. Whereas like you can come over to Melbourne and be like, yeah, I'm from like Perth. So, like, I don't know that this exists.
Yeah.
Or like, you're not that dumb, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know this exists. It's like, I'm a tourist, I'm trying to explore this place.
Right.
And so like, you don't know what the common traits of like Melbourne are versus what Perth is.
Yeah.
And trying to go, okay, is it okay to be a tourist? Or like, when you go up to Sydney, like, how do you know like this how the public transport system works?
Yeah.
That like, you can just tap your credit card. Whereas Melbourne, you have to get a Mikey.
Yeah, we're backwards, apparently.
Yeah. Best city in the world, but backwards.
Yeah. Just like how Tokyo still relies on, not only Tokyo, but like a lot of Japan still operates with coins. Like,
Yeah,
you can't pay with a card. Like, what?
Come on, Japan.
Yeah.
So that's like quite interesting from the idea of like, what is the idea of being a tourist? Like seeing a world, like traveling is like to see a moment in time, like, because it's like both parts of to go somewhere to see a place at a point in time, which is like your street photography of like, I get the sense, it's the first time I've connected to it of seeing a photo of like Ballarat in 1889 of like the old city.
Yeah.
Some guy was like, fuck, we need to take a photo of these buildings. I'm like, why do you need to take a photo of a building in like 2022? It's like a building.
Yeah.
But in another 30, 50 years, like they might all be floating and you're like, back in the day, guys, these were on the ground. These were like, and so it's like this capturing a moment in time, but then also experiencing a moment in time. You're not just like viewing it externally inside it, like a was it Scrooge? Like your three things of like you're floating through the time, seeing it as it is, but like you're not actually in the present.
Yeah.
Versus like being in it would be like, let's tangential back to karaoke.
Okay.
You can go back through and like see people doing karaoke and being like, oh, this group of people go in and do karaoke. But there's also the ability, the influential experience of going, I'm actually doing karaoke.
Oh God. There's still some PTSD from like 10 years ago. And whenever like anyone plays Yellow by Coldplay, yes, great
It's
song.
different.
Great song. Oh.
It's such an interesting choice of songs as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Because I guess it had to be in English and somewhat known, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't remember what else we came up with. But Coldplay.
yeah. It's transcendental beyond country borders.
Hopefully.
Um,
I never asked for feedback. Maybe they were like, "Oh, what is this garbage?" Anyway.
You like kind of hoping to
Better
be on
not to
like
know.
China's like, what is it? China Idol?
Yeah.
You're like, fuck, I really wish I had been picked, but you know, this whole coal plant stuff might be the better jam.
Yes. Worth it. Worth it.
Yeah.
I think maybe one curious theme to kind of explore a little bit is around, because I'm trying to unpack this for myself, and I've been thinking about like, is there a difference between traveling and going on holiday? To you, is there any differences or similarities there? Oh, with your mic flipped up.
Flipping. Yeah, that'll work. The way I would see it is like, there's people that like going on holidays and sitting on a beach or sitting somewhere and not moving to like basically disassociate and like have some level of peace and calm and quiet from like the work day and like their work life. Whereas traveling is like, when you're not working, you're seeing somewhere and like actively trying to have a different experience. And so my difference between a holiday and traveling is that the idea of whether it's for rest and recovery or for whether it's to like make the most out of life.
Right.
And so I almost think that you need to like, I personally feel at the moment to go on 2 weeks to a holiday in like Bali and sit on a beach is like pointless. It's like chilling, resting, recovering. It's like, it's a waste of time and effort to go and travel somewhere. Like, I think that's because of my value of wanting to understand the world and try to see and like understand as much of the world, or like, not understand the world, but like understand how people and culture and mentality influence people.
Right.
Versus like being bored on a beach and like zoning out from the sense of like, okay, work's too hard, I need a break from work.
Yep.
Like coming back to running, it's like the work is like the things, but like you gotta have a day off sometimes, and like you don't need a whole week off running all the time, and like you shouldn't be at a point where you need to have weeks off running, but like days off and like finding the balance of the stress and the rest of things is probably the difference between holiday and traveling.
Right.
For me, it's like, if someone wants to go on a holiday, it's the intention to like reset.
Yes.
Whereas a travel is like an intentional ability to get some level of growth and understanding of the world.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
No, that I couldn't put it better. I think that aligns a lot with how I see, and there is a clear difference between those two mindsets. And I think here's my challenge.
Yeah.
I wonder if someone were to send you to Bali for 2 weeks, maybe the ultimate challenge would be to force you to sit on the beach for 2 weeks.
That is like a hard challenge.
Yeah.
Like, it's like
no running 100 miles, no running up elevation or mount da. It's like sit on a beach for 2 weeks. There you go.
It's probably like it would be tough to sit in boredom and like to sit in the mundane, and like even like my intention is like, how do I get something out of the mundane? Like, how do I get some? And like the equivalent of that would be to like go to a silent meditation thing for like a whole week, or like 4 days, or like a weekend or something like that.
Yeah.
To almost get comfortable with the boredom.
Yeah.
because that's almost like part of the traveling of, is walking around a city enough? Like, do you see enough? But like driving around a whole city, you see it, but you can't feel it because you're going too quick.
Going too quick, exactly.
And then like a walk, you can't see as much. Whereas a bike, you can see more, but it's still going too quick to feel it. But like, where's this balance of boredom in it? Of like, sometimes like it is the mundane elements that you get the most from it.
Exactly. I think that's true. And, you know, one of my favorite memories from India was paying 20 cents to get a one-way ticket on the metro train.
Yeah.
Like,
where to?
Oh no, I was traveling like from where I was staying, the original suburb I stayed at, and I was traveling 15 kilometers south.
Yeah.
So the options I had was like, the first option was to catch a cab, but I was like so shell-shocked from like the original transit from like the airport to the accommodation that it was too much, and I didn't want to sit in a cab for like 45 minutes. So that was out the door. And then the second was to walk or run. I was like, that's not gonna happen. Then the third option was like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out, and figuring it out meant catching the train.
Yeah.
And that was like the most exciting one, and it turned out great.
Yeah. There's something to like public transport that is like quite fascinating of how people get around a city.
Yeah.
And like how the city's been built to operate. Like Melbourne's like a very interesting example in the sense of there's trams, there's trains, there's like the metro, and there's like V line to go like further. But the way metro works is it's very into the centre. It works around the CBD. There isn't an overlapping ring, and like most of the travel is based on roads. And so in the next 40 years, they're trying to create like a loop train that goes around the suburban loop, basically, that connects everything. That is like
so this. So if like this is the center and you have like separate lines going out, then the loop will connect the lines?
Yeah, on the far outside. So it's like 30, 40 minutes outside of the city, basically, and like a ring around that connects existing train lines.
Oh, wow.
Which is huge, a huge process.
It'll take us like 50 years, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, correct. But like it's quite odd that like you go to like London or like a lot of the major European cities and it doesn't exist like that, but you can link up to multiple trains to get to different places. Then it doesn't centrally come into somewhere that there are lines that go all over the place that you don't understand why someone decided to put a line there.
Yeah.
But like they all kind of link up.
Yes.
In a sense. And so to get around like that is quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Even like I'd imagine in like India, the metro is like underground and or is it above? Like it's a way to get out to somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
And like for 20 cents, it's like nothing. Yeah. But like you can see a lot on the train and like how people get to the day to day. And it allows you to be present because it's sort of like guided. Like you kind of feel a little bit more safe on a train than what you do in a car.
Yeah, it was more peaceful, somewhat.
Yeah.
Maybe if I could share like one observation from that train ride, it was that if like someone were to complain that their commute is boring, let's say, a typical commute, from what I was looking at anyway, would involve you hanging out the side of a train with the doors open.
Yeah.
So it was very common. Actually, in Mumbai, I never got on a train that had doors that were closed.
Oh.
So by default, I assumed that they were all open.
Yeah.
And so these were like open air carriages.
Yeah.
And the best seats were the ones that were, you know, you would hang with your hand on the rail or whatever, and then you will poke your head out the side because that's where you would get the ventilation from the airstream. So those were the best seats, and the worst seats were the ones like in the carriage.
Yeah, in the middle.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like almost the opposite. Melody, you want to be like in the middle on a seat near the window.
That's right.
Yeah.
So so if your commute gets boring, just stick your head out and risk your life. Get some air. There's never a dull day.
Yeah. Interesting. And what was your experience on that metro like? Because like I get the sense if it's like open air, people hanging out the sides, that metro in Melbourne like just wouldn't exist because you're in a tunnel, and they're like, nah,
right.
you're not allowed outside of the train.
Yeah.
Whereas like a metro train there is like, just hold on, like don't touch the wires, but just hold on.
Yeah.
It's like they're one rule.
Yeah. The rules appeared to be quite loose. You know, I saw people crossing the tracks to get across platforms.
Yeah.
I saw people crossing the tracks to get between trains.
Yeah.
I saw people hang out the side. And then another observation was that, you know, things were quite calm in the carriage. Like people were kind of like minding their own business. You might be like right beside someone, and everyone would just be like, you know, it's kind of like here in that, you know, like 4G or 5G wireless tech was like, you know, widespread, and like everyone was on their phone, kind of like doing their own thing, like maybe like brain rotting or whatever. But it wasn't noisy, and yeah, it was pretty calm. There was another type of carriage that I went in, which was like, it had no seats, and that was more like a one for transporting goods. So I think I was not supposed to be in that carriage, but I got in anyway because I'm a foreigner and I'm stupid.
Do what you want.
So I think there's a particular job or like group of people who are called coolies, and coolies work by balancing heavy objects on their heads. So I don't know much about the history, so I won't dive too deep, but I would see like pretty young people like carry like big buckets of like fish, groceries, and sometimes just bags of whatever, some miscellaneous stuff on their heads.
Yeah.
And things were the things they would lift would be often too wide to kind of like, you know, just like pick it up from the ground and put it on your head. So when they would set it down, they'll do it fine. But when they would have to put it back on their head, they would have to recruit someone to help them. So I remember seeing someone like just get up. So the worker, the person who was working as a coolie, he would get up and like point at the bucket and like nudge the person who was closest to him. He'd be like, "Hey." And then
it was like a continual ritual of like people continually going, "I need help, man."
Yeah, and there's like a social like contract of like, "Can you please help me lift this on my head?" And then, you know, the bystander would like help that, and then like off the coolie went to do the job. And that was wild to see from being in that carriage I wasn't supposed to be in.
Yeah, like it's like a courier, like an Indian courier.
Yeah,
but
that's
like,
right. Yeah.
You don't have a car to get around. It's basically like your own ability to get through trains and transport
raw fish,
stuff.
Clothing. I saw a woman peeling onions on the fly. Yeah.
You do?
All sorts. Yeah.
That would be a lot of crying on a train. Or maybe like her eyes are just so used to it now that she just doesn't even affect her.
Yeah. It's a wild place.
Is there anything that you feel like you'd want to do differently when you travel next time? That like is different to the current way that you travel and see the world?
I think maybe the one comment I have is that if I were to go back to India, I wouldn't catch any flights. I would catch the train.
Yeah.
Because that's like, for me, the next step above catching the metro trains. Like I would like to travel between cities or towns, like with the train system, because the flights were too good that it kind of broke my illusion of being a backpacker.
Okay.
So
you didn't feel like an OG. You felt like a bit of an imposter.
Oh, man, now I'm back to normal, like in a sense. Like when I flew from Mumbai to Calcutta, it was with a budget airline. So I was like, oh man, am I going to survive? Was the first question. And then the second thing was like, oh, I'm flying, this kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I kind of want to catch a train, but I didn't have enough time. But the airline, even though it was a budget airline, it was way better than AirAsia or any other budget airlines I flew with. Yeah. It was so good that I was kind of like bummed out.
What do you feel like why do you want to do it backpacking? Like how do you define the difference between being a backpacker and just traveling? Like what makes you want to embody that the most?
For me, it's probably because like the first overseas trip I did was as a backpacker out of necessity. Like I didn't have that much money at the time, and I was with my brother, and we would our first trip overseas was to Europe. Yeah. So there we were in London, Munich, and all these like amazing places with no money.
Yeah.
And we only made that possible because we were backpackers.
Yeah.
You know, staying in like cheap hostels, eating decent food, but mainly spending most of our time and money through into experiences.
Yeah.
Rather than buying stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't like building up material things.
Yeah.
What when you were like traveling and experience, like what makes you still feel like, even though that was your initial experience, that you still want to keep living that way or traveling that way?
Yep.
Like what is the valuable part to doing it and seeing the world in that context as a backpacker?
For me, with this India trip, like I knew that it's been a while since I've picked up the backpack, so in many ways it was like one of the more uncomfortable options I could choose, and that was what fascinated me. I was like, so it kind of became maybe the most exciting, maybe the most risky pathway to choose, and I chose that.
Classic runner embracing too much David Goggins. I need to choose the hard path. I need to like find the uncomfortability.
Like, and it was hard, right? Like, for example, I was chatting with my sister-in-law, and she has like complete opposite travel preferences to me, and I was trying to explain like, wait, I couldn't. So here's the problem. She was trying to figure out what my plans were, and the only response I could give her was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And she was like really frustrated. That like riled her up.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, all I have is a ticket and insurance and maybe the first 3 nights.
Yeah.
Full stop. And she's like, what?
Like, how can you not have certainty when you travel? Like,
yeah. But that was the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, you know, to be fair, I'm not saying it's the, you know, one solution for everyone. It was a deliberate choice, and it's a particular way of seeing things when you're overseas. It's my preferred way, but it's not for everyone.
Yeah. I'm like, what's the... Because that's the way I want to do Europe when I go back in 4 weeks, is like, I've got nothing booked except flights, probably need to get travel insurance at some point.
Yeah.
But like to go, this is what I want to do. And even though it probably is like somewhat marginally more expensive to not have stuff pre-booked in, I'm like, am I trying to avoid being bored over there by having to choose stuff on the fly? Or like, rather than just being a mundane, it's like, which one's easier and which one's actually harder to do, to like have stuff booked in. And so I think I'm like, my current theory almost is like, I need to create like a bit of a spreadsheet with all these different things and ideas on, so that as you don't actually decide where you're going to go, but you've got like options to like, this is what I feel like doing.
Yeah.
And that also, if it's not on the list, it's also an option. But like, if you've got nothing to do, or you like, this is something that I feel like would be cool, you can put that on the list.
Yes.
Almost.
Yeah. There's probably, there's a balance between like, you know, having enough certainty in some areas. Like, I knew I was going to sleep somewhere at night.
Yeah.
So I made sure that things were organized for that.
Yeah.
But where things were less critical, I left it as open-ended as I could have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. What do you feel like is the one, to kind of sum this up, and we'll probably end the podcast there, I reckon. I reckon it's probably been about an hour. I'm trying to get on the vibes. I reckon it's a bit over an hour.
Wow.
What's the one philosophy that you've taken from all your traveling that you like will apply for as many travels and like trips moving forward?
I think for me, like, my personality is such that I like understanding things, and I have a brain that likes to figure things out in advance. So one of the challenges I often run into is that by going through the motions of figuring things out, I kind of develop my own conceptions of what reality looks like. So what I'd like to do going forward is to kind of like design into my life these periods where it's deliberately open-ended, so that I can break my assumptions by design, even if I don't want them to, in order for me to see what I need to see.
Okay. How do you intentionally break those like thoughts?
I think traveling is a good medium for it, which is putting yourself in unfamiliar environments, away from support networks, like forcibly putting yourself in a physical environment.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can be in the same place and still see things differently. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's also here of like by you trying to understand, you're actually intentionally trying to shift your perspective on the world, as opposed to like travel and still keep your perspective and go, fuck, these people still don't know what they're talking about. Like you're not trying to learn. Like there's still a growth element to how you travel.
Yeah, I think, I mean, maybe it comes down to intentionality. I don't know, because I could have traveled to India and like just reaffirmed my own assumptions of, the food was dirty, the air's unclean, and there was nowhere to run, so, all that stuff, and like full stop. But I actually have so many more questions now because I went into it with with that blank slate.
Yeah.
So now when people ask me like, oh, would you go back to India? I'm like, sure. Like, I wouldn't have said that originally.
Yeah.
I would have been like, I kind of want to go to Tokyo again. I kind of want to go to Europe again. Like India's like, like, but now like when I think of going back to India, I'm like, wow, there's so many questions that I've yet to see for myself. Yeah.
Sick. Very cool. I like that. Shifting and breaking perspectives.
Yeah.
End it there. It's a good place to put it.
Thank you.
Another sick episode.
It's good. We could keep going for like 5 hours, but anyways.
If only.